I'm Joshua, and I'm an INTP, and first and foremost, I would like to say thank you for viewing this video, and subsequently viewing my channel. The topic of this video will be on the incommensurability of MBTI with cognitive science in neuroscience. And so, the reason I'm making this video is because my video where I questioned my return to YouTube and why I wanted to step away from the video video making platform is because my goal in making Jungian typology commensurate with what we understand and know in terms of neuroscience and cognitive science is utterly impossible. And I cited because there is no theoretical maxim for what the brain is and how it functions as being my primary reason. But I'll go into more detail about what I mean specifically and some larger, broader criticisms for MBTI that I did not make clear in that video. And I'm doing this because of a comment that I received recently. I think that for anything to be actionable, it has to fundamentally have a pragmatic and empirical basis to it. That's my first assumption. So, for example, take medicine. If medicine is to function, then medicine's practice can only be on what can be seen to be scientifically valid in the sense that the ways in which the medical profession chooses to describe something, the ways in which they choose to conduct their practices in terms of what are some appropriate remedies and means of surgical techniques, they must be things that can be one reproducible, and they must also be reliable. And in many ways, Typology is not like this because it is very much so in line and in step with the thinking of Eastern philosophy. And Jung was a Darwinist, but his Darwinian interests were more so in trying to understand where all ideation arose from in terms of the collective unconscious. Why is it that the psyche takes the various organizational patterns it takes, and how do these things play themselves out in mythology and drama, and where does it really rank in the landscape of human salience? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that goal necessarily, but there is a reason why Jungian topology falls deaf on certain people, is because it is not something that is universal in the sense that it's not from a basis of pragmatism and empiricism. And when you take out pragmatism and empiricism, you make it such that it's not like nobody can find a type or anything like that. That's not what I mean. But I mean in the sense that I think that all psychology and all interest in physiology and psychology is fundamentally medicine and science. We only really care about these things because they can alleviate what I or many consider the tragedies of existence, or the infirmities that we receive from maladaptive growth or anything like that, where we're psychological beings, and because we're psychological beings, because we're developmental psychological beings, we can have psychologies that are constructed in such a way that when we try to act out into the world with these maladaptive, let's say, organizations, we injure ourselves and we injure others. We have a very difficult time having appropriate relationships. We have a very difficult time achieving certain fundamental goals that are in conjunction with our base drives and things of that nature. And so, if you have an instrument that does not get down to why a thing looks, or let's just say a psychological psychological phenomenon. Why a psychological phenomenon looks the way it does in terms of the total description of the person, then it's not really good medicine. It might be something that can work for a small population of people. Or maybe it is good as a philosophical exercise and a tool for germination of ideas, in the sense that it can inspire thought about the world and people that wouldn't be so without it. And I'm not saying that typology is not useful in certain ways and that it does not lead to an enormous amount of creativity one can have with a description of themselves or others in the world, in ways in which one can think about the world. But it is not actionable. It's not good medicine. It's just really not good medicine. And the reason it's not good medicine is because it's not physiologically based. Jung did not seat the concepts of the self, the collective unconscious, or even the archetypes really in physiology. When Jung is talking about psyche, he is talking about the mind, but at the same time, he is not talking about, well, it's blurry, and that's what's hard, because, well, it's Jung. Jung was a very, very open individual, and he had a great deal of original and profound ideas, but when he looked to give reason for his descriptions, it's basically ontology, or ontology, not ontology. Well, yeah, ontology simultaneously. He got these models and descriptions from what he produced or conducted in his clinical practice, but the descriptions of the brain and what we understand in terms of behavior and genetics and all other sorts of features to why a person looks or acts a certain way in the world is only ascertainable and intelligible through a certain scientific vantage point. And it's because Jung was not actually interested in the materialization of the world. He was not interested in the physiological representation of the psyche and the self, because he saw those things as limited. He was not interested in those things, so he did not move to create a way in which you could understand what's going on with a person in terms of the actions and firing of neurotransmitters, because Jung honestly thought that those things were cheap, and that they could never describe the totality of the human experience or human phenomenology. And I don't think that they do, and especially not currently, and I don't think that they'll ever be able to completely describe what the phenomenology of a person is like. But you can honestly look at a doctor. You have your phenomenology of what the flu is like, what you feel and things like that, but that's not what's causing it, and that's not why it appears the ways in which it does. And that's not honestly what's going on with the mechanism of the virus and all other sorts of features that are absolutely necessary in order to properly treat the disease. It's the same thing to say for, well, if somebody, it's the difference between really what people say, myth and facts, because not to say anybody's phenomenology is myth, but phenomenology is not necessarily a description of the derivation or the source, the reason for. And it's not to say that Jung was not looking for the reason for, but he was not looking for the principal overarching thing in empiricism and matter, which just wasn't what he was doing. And because you can only really have a viable way to treat people in the sense that, I'm not, and Jung was somewhat of an elitist too, and so I should put that bit in there because Jung was a student of Nietzsche. I don't know if most people know this about Carl Jung, but Jung and Nietzsche had very interesting ideas about what they thought of the masses or most people. And Jung was not necessarily interested in popularizing his work. That was not something he was concerned with. And it was Myers and Briggs that made his work accessible to lay audiences. It was many other thinkers besides Jung who made his works and ideas accessible to a lay audience because they thought that they could help people. But Jung himself was not trying to make something that was universal. Let's just say that. Though he was trying to come up with a universal description, but he did not believe nor think in certain ways that most people would ever or could ever benefit from his work, um, for multiple reasons, in the sense that individuation and certain other things. I don't know if that's the kind of ideas that Jung had at the end of his life still, but those were definitely some of the ideas he had in the middle of his career as a depth psychologist, and uh, he he's a particular figure. He's a very extraordinary man, but in terms of what he was trying to do, he wasn't exactly a fan of the, let's just say, rational way of looking at the world. Though he did not see anything necessarily, he didn't see it as unbeneficial in a certain way, but Jung was not trying to case his arguments or appeal to something that was in matter or that was a part of physiology. And because Jung did not try to do that or and was not interested in those things, it is very, very difficult to create any sort of predictive model that is reliable. It's just the simplest way I can put it. And you need that in order to have medicine. I mean, if you don't have that, you honestly can't have medicine. It's not to say that MBTI isn't interesting, and it's not to say that it's not good philosophy or that it doesn't help people. I mean, I think that it does help people in certain ways, but it comes with some inherent problems with it in terms of the, well, it's like this. So whenever you read your type description, so I suppose I'm diverging a bit in what I'm going to say next, but whenever you read your type description, what you're reading is, let's just say there is no general description of what a human being is like. So you don't begin to understand your type in the context of the whole landscape of human nature or human phenomenology, and that's problematic to me. Mostly because people tend to overestimate the differences in themselves, um, and two, people also tend to get a bit. That is partly because the descriptions never say anything negative about any person's type or anything like that, but there is no real, and that might not be, and that's not solely up to Jung or anything like that, because typology has been in the hands of very many others after Jung's initial conceptions of it. But it's definitely the case that well, you don't know what it means to be human. And because you don't know what it means to be human fundamentally, you don't really know what it means to be yourself. And you have no real context to put that description of, let's say, ISFP or an INTJ or ENFP or anything like that. And that, to me, makes it such that there's a disconnect between the ideation and the description of self and the modus operandi of the actual self, in the sense that you're a complex of organizations. You're sort of a soup of serial nodes that come together from so many different levels and layers of, let's just say, reality or being, that it's not even funny. I mean, you're something that is connected in the world, and the connectivity of yourself to the world, social context, and so many other things make you you. A lot of you lives inside of you, but a lot of you lives outside of you. It's this constant dynamic between the two. And Jung had this idea of circumambulation, but I mean, you're doing this, not only this internal spinning, but this external spinning. By you acting on the environment and changing the environment, you are acting on yourself and changing yourself, because the environment always acts on you and makes you who you are to a certain extent. So as you do this dynamic of you going into yourself and coming out of yourself, doing things on the world and influencing the world, and the world doing it back on, and so forth and so on to you, there is a much richer picture in terms of what your psychology is, that does not come down to cognitive functions even in the slightest. And cognitive functions are limited in their descriptive capacities. And the reason they're limited in their descriptive capacities is because most traits are variable in their nature, in the sense that things sit on continuums, and it's a very small minority of people that are honestly the extremes of things. Also, it's the case that different traits interact with one another. So traits usually aren't distributed also in sets. Some of them are, but you can find highly intelligent tall people, and you can find highly intelligent short people. You can find highly creative gay female rational thinkers. But I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that you can honestly mix and match a lot of traits, and you'll get a person, so long as it fits within a certain set of parameters. If you took all the set of qualities that a human being can come with, you can construct a person. It's a theoretical exercise, but it's true empirically. How much of the overall landscape of the distribution and assortment of traits that we honestly see is debatable, quite honestly, genetically, because there are many people that are unborn in certain ways, because there are probabilities, man. Things that, I mean, I don't understand as well as I understand other things, but I certainly know that sexual selection and various other factors make it such that probabilities are going to roll themselves out, that there are distinct types of complexes of people you can get, or complexes of traits that you can get in a person. There are more combinations than actual iterations. Let's just put it like that. There are more combinations than actual iterations. And that's problematic because, well, even in that limited iteration of different types of people you can get, there is an infinitude to a certain extent about the degree to which certain things like abilities, interest, taste, predilections, all sorts of things are going to show themselves to be like in the world. And you'll not see really certain, well, to put more concrete specificity to that, if well, take something like IQ for example, because I mean that's the simplest thing I think I can describe. When you're looking at somebody's average IQ, you're looking at a an amalgam of various sub structures or sub abilities, sub tests. I'm basing this off of how IQ tests work, but it's theoretically works like this. You see general intelligence show itself up in certain clusters of cognitive activity or functioning. And so you make these different types of tests and test somebody on these batteries, and you aggregate and average their scores on each of these individual batteries, because each of these individual sub-cognitive functionings have something to say about, or have some correlation with the G factor or general intelligence in and of itself. So you're able to indirectly measure the thing, basically, is what an IQ test is trying to do. My point in that is that because it is this, when you're looking at general intelligence, it is this aggregation of things. Two people can have the same IQ, but can have a very different cognitive tool set or ability. Now, once you get over a certain score, that becomes more and more of the case. Once you go below a certain score, it's going to become less of the case. But it's definitely the case that you can find two people that are comparably of the same level of general intellectual ability, but have very different, let's just say, abilities. And that's why why it appears that people have, well, that's one of the reasons why people appear to have multiple, or there's different types of intelligence, but there's really not. Excuse me, I made, I think, like at least 2 videos on why I think, well, that's a horrible idea, but the point being is this, that even when you're looking at something like an ability like general intelligence, the actual phenomenology of that person, or the actual way that they appear in the world, all of it is a mess of things. It's not neat. It's just really not neat at all. And because you can have it such that several traits can link together to make some sort of emergent thing that you're observing in what this person is doing, you might mistake, because a lot of behavior, well, let's just put it like this too. A lot of what people, okay, so let me finish that thought. You might mistake that people are what they're not because appearances are synonymous with whatever other appearances, because you can, life or nature works in a very much so emergent kind of threshold way, that you need enough of certain things to come together to get said thing, but that doesn't mean it's, there's a homogeneous expression, but a heterogeneous etiology. And when you're looking for, I guess, predictable things, or medicine, you're looking for etiology mostly. You only care about why the thing looks the way that it does. You don't care about really what it is, like, in the, or the effect. You don't ever care about that, really, if you're trying to practice medicine or science. That's why science is very instrumental in the development of medicine and medical technology. And I just think psychology is a different form of medicine. I mean, that's really what I think it is. I think that's the point of it. As I said, that even Jung thought that the point of typology was self-actualization. It's meant to do something. It's not to be like just a pretty little knick-knack on a wall. And more so, harking back to just that previous ideas of heterogeneous etiologies, let's just say this. More so, the case is when you're analyzing another person, and even when another person or when a person is analyzing or reflecting on themselves. At one layer, you as the, I guess, observer have some insight into what really motivates them or makes them work. From the standpoint of the actor or the one being observed, they have another layer of analyses that they're aware of because it's their own experience. But even with that, issue is both of most of what you can see or what you can understand or what you can know or is intelligible to you is not the why. It's not why any of the things are occurring. So take behavior, for example, which is a bloody freaking the most complicated thing that anybody could look at. Why any one person does something is, yeah, like there's a lot of things, and some of those things you're cognizant of. Many of those things you aren't, quite honestly. And that was part of Jung's idea in terms of the shadow functions and the shadow and things of that nature, because Jung definitely recognized that people were not necessarily in control of all the ways that they perceived or behaved. They certainly weren't aware of them. But Jung thought you could be made aware of them and that you could slowly bring them online. But the truth is that that's not necessarily true. There is always going to be a degree of lack of autonomy and volition you're ever going to have of yourself, and you're going to de facto, in a certain manner, just be subservient to the overall biological makeup that you have. I mean, you're living in, if everybody says reality is a matrix, well, you're living in the matrix. You're the matrix of your damn self. I mean, that's your existence, is to live in the matrix. Your body, that, and a lot of other things, your brain, a lot of other things, that's what the matrix is. And it's definitely the case, well, I can't say definitely, but it's most likely the case that, yeah, so again, back to behavior, like specifically with behavior, it's most likely the case that you can't get to the root of any one behavior. Yeah, I mean, there's, yeah, you can, but can you get to the final seminal principle thing from which it all arises? Most likely no, because there are multiple forces that come together to make you want to act or see something in the world in the ways in which you do. What gives you your ideas, what gives you your perceptions and senses and all these other features that make you something in the world that has an appearance and a name and personhood and things like that, they're rather discreet, and they're not exactly things that nature equipped you. They're not things that nature cared to equip you with the knowledge of, because you don't need a car to know how it runs in order for it to operate itself. I mean, look at self-driving cars. I mean, they don't have to know exactly how quick or whatever their carburetor and things are going. The degree of self-awareness even thinking cars have to have is so limited. And the overall amount of self-awareness, or the sum total of self-awareness that a human being can have about themselves in the universe, is very, very limited. It's a very, very limited or small number, and it grows exponentially with advances in science and specifically cognitive science and neuroscience, and some social science. Social science still needs to be redeemed, but at some point in time, it's going to be useful in the future. Because it's like that, a lot of what we do with typing and things of that nature are flawed exercises. Can that ever be amended? I don't think so, because of the fundamental nature of reality itself and the ways things seem to be made up. I don't really think so. I think that the only saving grace would be that you could have, in terms of it being medicine or science, philosophy and interesting ideas and things like that is one thing. Being keeping it around as something to generate ideas and various other things like that is one thing, but being a scientific hypothesis or theory or anything like that, no, it's not going to fly. The only thing that could make it work is that if you had what I call a principal maximum of the brain, in the sense that this is what the brain is, simply, this is what the brain is, and this is how it works, and this is how it works. If we had things like that, you could definitely figure out a way to remodel. If we had a description like that, you could definitely figure out a way to remodel or revise topology such that it was commensurate with, empirical science. But we don't have anything like that, so you can't do that. And there are a lot of things we just still don't understand. I mean, but knowledge is a process. It's one failure after another, stacking on another failure, stacking on another failure, such that the sum total of these failures lead to a truth, or the truth, if you're even interested in something like that. But yeah, that's basically those are basically my thoughts and why I decided to forego that project. I mean, I'll finish the 16 type series. I'll say in this video too that I've decided to stick around and continue to make videos. Can't say in what capacity and things like that. My next video will be something about INFJs. But yeah, but just to finish this, that's just what I think. That's all I can say. So hopefully you found that interesting, and thank you for watching. Bye.